Hello, Hanyu, and welcome to Sustain, the podcast where we talk about sustaining open source for the long haul. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? Why am I slipping the Bajoran word for hello into the opening for this podcast? Excellent questions, everyone. I'm very excited to talk to our guests here today. Before I introduce them, I want you to know who the voices are. I'm Richard Littauer. Hey, everyone. Yeah, that's still me. I'm going to be the sole host on this podcast today, but that is okay because I'm joined by not one, but by two illustrious guests. I'm joined today by Dawn Wages. That's Dawn, like the dawn coming up. Dawn, how are you doing today?
I'm well. Hello.
Amazing. And I'm glad to have you here calling in from Philly. And from just up the road, calling in from New York, we have Loren Crary. Loren, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
Excellent. The reason why I slipped Bajoran is that Dawn is obviously Bajoran engineer on the social medias, which is the best. And Bajor, if you don't know, is from Deep Space Nine. There's a really great documentary about the great work that the Federation was working on there. So if you ever need to go see that, you can go see that. Loren, do you have, I know Zelda is in your future. Do you have other major identities that you feel are important to mention at this time?
My big nerd affiliation is with the crossword community, which is its own language, but doesn't have its own word for hello.
That's interesting. Well, it does. It's just 5 down.
Yeah.
That having been said, both of you are affiliated with a project that is dearer to my heart than Star Trek, as hard as that may seem, which is the Python language. Today, we're going to be talking about Python and the Python Software Foundation. Now, the Python language, as you may know, listeners, is the most popular, most successful open source language in the world. It is itself open source, and the ecosystem around it is truly massive and amazing and filled with really, really cool people. But the language is also sponsored by a foundation, the PSF. The PSF is a 501c3, which is a technical tax designation within the US, which allows it to basically get charitable donations. And it has a small skeleton crew. I think the last time I checked, it was 17 or something, but there's also some of those are part-time. 14.
Oh,
some of those
yes,
are part-time
plus contractors.
roles. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I did not do any research for this podcast, so I'm surprised I was even close to the right ballpark. That's very exciting. Dawn and Loren, tell me, where do you two sit in the hierarchy of awesome people who work at the PSF?
I'll start because Loren has Loren's staff. So I just finished my tenure as chair. So I just left and I get to hand the baton to my fantastic friend and colleague, Janis Littauer, who is now the chair of the Python Software Foundation Board of Directors. It is a volunteer position. Any leadership position on the board of directors is elected by the board for a year. And then a board tenure is typically 3 years, depending on when you start and whether or not you're taking over someone else's term. But a full term length is 3 years. So I was treasurer for a year and then chair for 2. It was a pleasure. And I'm so thrilled to talk a little bit about what I did, what the PSF does. I'm a fangirl volunteer for the PSF, but I'll kick it over to Loren, who runs stuff.
Yeah. So my role is deputy executive director. So I'm the number 2 to Deb Nicholson's number 1, which in my role, I started out in a purely fundraising role, and that's still the majority of my portfolio. So I work on making sure that there's enough money to keep those 14 people and that giant language running, keep the lights on, as well as doing a lot of behind the scenes internal stuff, managing the team, thinking a lot about strategy and direction, which is a big deal when you're trying to steer a ship that includes the millions of Python users. Although I should say we do not steer the direction of the language. We do, I would say, steer the direction of the community. But Python Steering Council, as you might guess from the name, steers the Python language. So that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years or so. I'm involved also in PyCon US, which is the flagship event of the Python community. It's happening. We're really excited to come to Long Beach, California this coming May. We've been in Pittsburgh the last 2 years, excited to hop coast and enjoy some California sunshine, some palm trees, some oceanside views, and get together with 2,500 of our closest friends to hang out and talk Python.
It's like coming back for camp. It's amazing.
Yeah. So a lot of what I do is making sure that we have the sponsorships in place from the companies that support the Python Software Foundation to do all of the work we do on Python and the event itself, and make sure there's a great experience for those 2,500 plus attendees.
Not just companies, individuals and non-government, well, non-business corporations like governments can also donate, and many do. That's great. That's really important work.
It is. It's a great segue into what's currently going on right now, our fundraiser. I am in some ways a beneficiary of the Python Software Foundation and the financial donations that came through when I first started learning Python. This is too old a game. I just hit about a decade. I got my snake tattoo at PyCon US in Pittsburgh this past year for my 10 years. But it all happened because I got tapped into my local Python users group, and they have relationships with the PSF specifically because the Philly Pug was a fiscal sponsoree of the PSF. And that means there's this reciprocal relationship to help with some local groups. And because there is the institution of the PSF that helps work with it, I was able to have friends to help me learn Python and grow this career of mine. So anyway, there are real stories behind funding the PSF, and I hope you join in as an individual listening to this podcast. If you have a company match, see if your company will match your donation to the PSF. Little bits help, but we like big dollar amounts, so try to poke the person with the purse strings.
My role is focused on partnering with companies and really love our sponsors, and they do an awesome job of putting community first and giving back by supporting Python and the PSF. I always like to say that if you want to know what a nonprofit does, look at who their funders are, and that's who they're working for, right? And so I love when we get individual contributors because I love working for the users of Python and PyPI, which we also run that massive service. So it's been really awesome to see individuals really step up, in particular this year during our fundraiser. And we have a very cute snake thermometer on our donate.python.org page. So if you want to make the little snake happy, make that number go up.
I love that. We weren't just brought on to talk about the fundraiser, although it is always good to mention it, and particularly for Python, because you do such amazing work. And the work isn't just about the Python language or PyPy, but also supporting the pugs. I feel doubly obligated to say that, the Python user group, because I'm on the board for Python New Zealand, which sometimes gets sponsored by the PSF as well. We just had our conference here, Kiwi PyCon, which was really, really great. And it was cool to see so many awesome people come back. It was like coming back at camp. For those of us who remember camp as being a nice place and not a horrible place where you got fun of playing the trombone. Loren, you said something interesting earlier, and I caught it because I've served on too many boards. You said, I work on strategy, and Dawn didn't say anything, and that made me kind of confused because normally when you have a 501c3 and you have an executive staff, they work on tactics. They work on breaking down what needs to get done according to the goals that are set by the board. And I know in this case, it's a double confusing thing because you also have the technical steering committee, which deals with the language, which Python Software Foundation tries not to interfere with because of historical precedents for how the language was set up. The PSF is there to help support the community at large. One of the really interesting things about American tax law, by the way, for those of you who didn't know, is that open source is not a charitable thing, which is why all the software charities are doing community work and not helping out Python as a language, which I think is really, really weird, and that should probably be changed. But Loren, am I correct in having my hackles / ears / I don't know what raised? Because it seemed like that was a strange wording choice, or does the PSF operate in another way that I'm unsure of?
I guess I should say I'm not aware of the legal distinction you made. Our mission is to support the language and the community. We leave the technical decisions of the language to the steering council, which is elected by the core developers. But we do contribute to the language in quite a few ways. We hold the copyright and the other intellectual property. Three of those contractors we mentioned are working directly on CPython. And then 2 of our full-time staff are working on security, both for the language, the ecosystem, and for the Python package index. So we are quite embedded in protecting and advancing the language itself. But the side I'm more involved, we've got awesome people on the technical side of things. I'm more involved on the community side of things. I did say the word strategy. I should say, to expand on that more, if my boss is listening, I'm not plotting a coup where I take over the...
Hi, Deb.
Hi, Deb. Wherever I take over the strategy of the Python Software Foundation. I will say I've worked at quite a lot of nonprofits over my time. I'm actually not from a tech or I'm not from a Python background. I'm not from an open source background. I'm not from a tech background. Working at the Python Software Foundation the last 4 years is my first exposure to any of those things.
So sorry. Welcome.
Thank you. No, I'm a recovering lawyer, so I've seen worse. This is audio, so you can say I awkwardly winked. So I've learned to use many different coffee makers. It's something you get out of working in various capacities in many nonprofits. The other thing is I do have some experience with different board structures. The role the board takes depends a lot on the size and maturity of the organization. So a smaller, newer org might be both operated and steered by the board. A more mature organization might delegate more of the strategy to the staff. I would say where the Python Software Foundation sits is when I say I'm working on strategy, I mean I'm more facilitating the strategic discussions. We're in the middle of some 5-year strategic planning that the board is leading, but it benefits a lot from staff support. And also, how do we translate that strategy into tactics? What conversations need to be had in order to formulate that strategy? How do we have the conversations that craft that strategy? So you're correct that the board is leading the strategy, but there needs to be, we call it a flywheel from the staff to keep things like that going. And I try to be that for the board on that, in that area. I definitely do in my own role a lot of strategy regarding revenue, just because that's my area of focus. So I would say there's a blurry line between what rises to the level of board strategy on the revenue side and where does strategy end, where do tactics start. So I'm self-consciously say that, yes, I do. I work on revenue strategy. What new channels should we be developing? What things do we need to make sure we're investing in maintaining? What things can we deprioritize? What things are we experimenting with? And we're a small team, small nonprofit, wear a lot of hats. That's just the job. So a lot of times putting that strategy into action is just how do I organize my day, right? So it sounds a little grand when you say I do revenue strategy, but that meant that, for example, today I chose to spend the morning at an external event trying to promote the CFP and PyCon US and connect with other technologists in the New York City area. And then I spend the rest of my day working with current sponsors.
I'll add so this is my first time chairing on a board, and I was treasurer the first year. Yes, and to all of the things that Loren said, I think what's really interesting about the flywheel approach is that the professionalizing of the organization is really the goal of a volunteer-driven for sustainability purposes. And we've hired fantastic experts with deep subject matter expertise in how to run a foundation and in open source infrastructure, shout out to E, and in events management and so much more. I mean, Olivia wears so many different hats. And in finance, shout out to Phyllis. So I think there's a really great collaborative and cross-functional kind of education approach that happens when we do have meetings. And the staff join a lot of the board meetings as well. So we do get opportunity to get feedback and also to outsource kind of thought processes or bottlenecks or roads we want to trod down to the staff to be able to drive that mission, that set strategy, and then we can come back with a collaborative approach. So in those moments, I think we're always striving for more, and I'm not on the board right now, but I trust that it's still happening. But those are really enlightening moments. And I think they've just really changed my perspective on how the organizations work. Anyway, I went longer than I meant to. Just wanted to yes and Loren and say it's been really cool to learn from the team and also feel like I can share something to professionals I respect so much who run the PSF.
And just to add one thing that's interesting about the board setting strategy for the Python Software Foundation, and I'm trying to think of a way to not come out sounding like corny or canned, but the board for us is elected by the community. And so the community is in a very direct sense setting the strategy for the Python Software Foundation. I joke that there's an annual election of who gets to message me on Slack, because I talk to the board a lot on our Slack. But that's very real that the community selects 12 representatives and they get to meet once a month and decide what the PSF is going to do in a real sense. So it's pretty different from boards I've interacted with that are more selected by the organization. So it's very awesome how much diversity of opinion and approaches and focuses that we get on our board, and everyone brings that in, and it feels like we're really getting kind of a slice of the community to talk to about what do you think we should be doing and how should we be spending our time and what are the needs. So that's a special element of the PSF, and it is not possible to buy a seat on our board, which is just a different way of setting things up that some other nonprofits in the tech space do. We're not set up that way. Yep. Our board is elected and we get to hear fairly directly from the community members we are serving.
As one of those community members, I want to give a double shout out to Phyllis. There are some unsung heroes in open source. Phyllis is one 100%. Of them, if you don't know. Last I checked, she was also running the books at the OSI, or at least she was when Deb and I worked there together way back, I don't know, half a decade ago, before Deb went on to the PSF. So great people. Phyllis is awesome. Phyllis, you're great. All right. All of this was a long preamble to saying what the frick went down with the NSF. So yes, for those of you who aren't aware, the National Science Foundation and American Institute of Science, which has congressionally mandated usage of funds, there's probably a better way of saying that, but they get funds from Congress to support science, had a big amount of money available to open source projects. I think this was through the POSE program, but do correct me if that's wrong.
It's actually the NSF SAFE OSE.
SAFE. Excellent. Okay, OSE. So the SAFE program. So SAFE tell me OSE. About SAFE OSE. And tell me about the large grant that the Python Foundation got and then didn't get. Who has the lowdown?
Yeah. So where do I start? We were actually pretty close to, it was only about a year ago that maybe a little more that we got wind of this opportunity. Speaking of revenue strategy, one of the things we're thinking about is trying to diversify our revenue strategy, i.e. try to get money from more different places so that it all doesn't move together, right? And so we're not dependent on any one source. And so one source of income for us is corporate sponsorships, another is individuals. One thing we haven't really dipped our toes into is grant funding. And we thought that would be a great way to make our work more sustainable, the keyword of the podcast. So we were on the lookout for those, and I worked on very large grants before. I had not worked on a government grant, and I was somewhat loath to do so because they are famously complicated and difficult to apply for, and institutions have entire departments devoted to applying to government grants. Python is very popular amongst academic scientists. I don't know if any are listening, but you can probably sympathize with what goes into applying to an NSF or similar grant. All to say that we considered very carefully whether we wanted to embark on this journey. But this NSF SAFE OSE program, which stands for Safety, Security, and Privacy of Open Source Ecosystems. And one thing we definitely know about, we don't know a lot about government grants. We do know about open source ecosystems. And we also definitely know about security in those ecosystems. As I mentioned, we have 2 full-time staff working on security in particular. So we took a look at this grant and it felt almost like it was written for us. We just really met the criteria, check, check, check. We're serving a mature, stable ecosystem. We have a lot of users. There's a lot of impact.
From what I know about the NSF, it was written for basically Python. It was written for exactly this sort of problem, like large ecosystems of work that's necessary for the digital infrastructure that underpins modern science. So I can see why you would check it off and be like, yeah, all these things fit.
And not only modern science, but modern government. As I was working on the first draft, I went through just literally looking for GitHub repositories for government agencies just to do the highest possible level, easy check of, hey, or obviously I don't know what these agencies are doing behind doors, but what they have on GitHub, I was able to find a whole list of government agencies that had projects up there in Python. And we know it is widely used, including in government, which the NSF cares for. That's part of their mission. So yeah, as you said, it seemed like really designed for us. And there aren't a lot of organizations in the same position as the Python Software Foundation. There aren't a lot of ecosystems that are similar to Python. So we thought it was worth giving it a shot, despite us being this scrappy, small but mighty team. And I really am overdue now to shout out my collaborator, the lead. It's called a PI, the primary investigator, was Seth Larson, who's the security developer in residence at the Python Software Foundation. He's amazing. He does a brilliant amount of work, and he's also brilliant at communicating about it. So he kind of signed up with me and said, yes, let's do this, because he was on the hook to write the bulk of the proposal, the technical contents, which is to say most of the contents, while I was more project managing and pulling together the associated documentation, things to do with the budget. Oh my gosh, they require so many PDFs. The org chart and our policies on different things. Blah, blah. So we decided to go in on it. Seth and I, mostly Seth, with my support, right? I was the co-PI, it's called. We write the first draft of the preliminary proposal, it's called, and we submit that on its due date in January this year, which...
Massive amount of work already. Good job. That's really hard to do.
Thank
That's
you.
amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So it was a bit of a crunch. We got it done. Those of you paying attention to US politics might know that something else happened in January of this year. So there was a change of government, and then we started hearing announcements about changes that they were making to the NSF. And basically we were like, oh, I guess this isn't going to happen. It's an NSF grant. Good on us for making an effort and getting it in, but it sounds like that's just kind of on pause. So
it was at this stage in February that I and another PI just abandoned our NSF grant that we were working on. It's not going to happen. Why bother going through the amount of work it would take to write a 100-page document? Let's just not do it. So I hear you on that. But you went further. You kept going.
We had already submitted the thing. And I guess I haven't mentioned what it was for. It was for security. And the program is called Safety and Security in Open Source Ecosystems. We were applying to do security work for the Python ecosystem, doing some innovative, creating a new database of malware and doing some innovative processes that I will not describe in detail. I will leave that to my capable PI. It is described in the blog post that I'm sure we will link to. The important thing is it was just for security. We're going to do some work in-house, hire some contractors, bring on some staff, and do a bunch of security to make Python and the Python package index more secure. And we were also structuring it in a way that we thought would be transferable to other open source project registries. So that was the hope. That was the plan. And then I believe this was in April, which, if you were paying attention to what I said earlier, our major flagship event, PyCon US, is in May. So April is a little busy for us, but we got invited to submit a full application around that time. And we were like, you know what? if they're inviting us to do it, we don't see any reason why this wouldn't work. The work we're proposing is not in conflict with any guidelines that we've seen. So let's do it. So we built on the preliminary proposal and submitted a full proposal, which is similar to the preliminary proposal, except longer and more work, more detail. So thank you. Huge shout out again to Seth Larson, who is a hero of coming up with great security plans and ideas and then describing them in a way that is persuasive and understandable. So we got to that stage and again, submitted it, and we'll see what happens. Of course, in parallel, I was keeping my eye on the news about, was there any litigation happening that was relevant to us, to our situation? Was there anything coming that could create a problem for us? And there did, sometime in May, come out terms and conditions that were going to be asked of new grants to sign on to. This, I believe, was after we had already submitted the full proposal that this news came out. And it was just really unclear what that was going to mean for us, because a lot of what was being litigated in courts or being discussed in news articles was projects where the work itself was diversity, equity, and inclusion related in some way. Whereas obviously the PSF, we support diversity. Like iLady is one of our fiscal sponsorees. That's in our core mission, but the work we were proposing under the grant was not in that category. So we were thinking it might still work out. And it was a large enough sum of money. It was $1.5 million, which our budget is under $6 million annually. So it was over 2 years, but still quite a lot of money and would enable us to do quite a lot of work. So we continued to pursue it while it was still possible, as far as we could tell. And as we moved through the process, we eventually got to the point where they asked us to sign or to agree to these terms and conditions. And they told us we were recommended to be awarded the grant, which was super exciting. And we were really pleased and proud. It was just something we'd never done before. I have the statistic in the blog, we wrote about it, but I think it's only 36% of first-time applicants get an award. And so we felt pretty excited that we were able to do that without like a big department behind us or anything like that. But we did get to the point where things were so in flux. We didn't feel like we knew for sure that what was true in May was going to be true in August. Mm-hmm. But these terms were still in effect. It came to the point where we had to go forward or drop out. We did all the things. We got legal advice. We talked to peers. We talked to people who had experience in applying for grants and who were currently applying for grants, whatever. And we brought everything to the board. And the board ultimately made the call that it was too risky and too counter to our mission to accept these terms that would not, which personally, I don't think I've explicitly said what they were, which is, sorry, Richard shaking his head at me as I've
It's okay. I was going to ask anyway.
backwards.
What were the terms that were so damning?
So let me read to not misspeak. We had to affirm the statement that we do not and will not, during the term of this financial assistance award, operate any programs that advance or promote DEI or, this is their phrasing, discriminatory equity ideology in violation of federal anti-discrimination laws. End quote. So if that sounds like you didn't know exactly what it meant, we definitely didn't know what it meant. And it was very new. This clause was only added to these terms a few months ago. And we didn't feel like we could confidently say that whatever we were doing would definitely not be in conflict with that. Because there were two major problems. One, I mean, like I say, the work we were trying to do with the funding was not connected to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they say discriminatory equity ideology, whichever phrasing you want to use. But the restriction applied to all of the work we do as an organization. And we did clarify a few times with them, like, are you really for real? Everything we do? And yes, was the answer. And the other problem is that it gave that term in particular and nothing else in the agreement, if we were found to be in violation, would allow them to claw back the money, including money that had already been invoiced and paid to us. So again, this is not legal advice. This is not anybody else facing this situation. Please get your own advice. But our analysis was that basically it would be too risky for us. Our budget is less than $6 million. If we received this money, we would spend it right away. It would be financially disastrous to us. To be frank, I couldn't tell you how likely that situation is, but if it came up, we simply couldn't absorb it. So brought all of this information to the board, and they voted unanimously to withdraw ourselves from the process, which was obviously a big bummer. We'd done a lot of work, but I was very comfortable with the decision because there wasn't any way that we were going to change what we did as an organization. And it didn't feel responsible to take on the risk that what some of our day-to-day activities could be looked at as violating these terms.
It was a very pragmatic kind of conversation when we had it. My tenure on the board, and from what I understand, if you can go back and look at voting records for the board, we really try in many instances to try to vote in consensus. And it is not because we all come with the same ideas or the same desired thoughts on executing. But when presented on kind of the health and safety and the future of the organization and the language and how we are going to be able to approach that and our goals, it made absolute sense that this was the next step, was to withdraw our name. I think we voted within minutes. It was one of the shorter kind of voting cycles. We talked about it for a long time. We were talking about it for near a year and had lots of heads up and conversations about what was coming down the pike and hoping that it didn't land in a way where we had to turn the money away. But the 1.5 million is not worth putting the future health and safety of the language and the organization in jeopardy by ambiguous and haphazardly, seemingly added language that's not been vetted. It's less than 6 months old.
It was definitely a pragmatic decision. I am also proud that at no point did anyone float, like, what if we just stop doing everything DEI and take the money? Like, I've been in groups where that idea would have been floated outside of this organization. And it really reaffirmed how good a place I've landed at the Python Software Foundation and in the Python community, that was just not on the table.
I have so few questions because it's really clear that was a really good explanation of what happened. And it makes sense to me. The lawyery part of my brain is saying ideology that violates federal law, but that would mean they'd have to actually show that you violated it, which means it would have to go to court. But then it could happen at any point in the future. So even the risk of that happening is too much. And also, who is the arbiter of what is equity ideology? That's kind of unimportant. What's more important is like, they're asking us to do stuff. No, that's in violation of our community principles. We're not going to do those things. And
being tied up in all of the machinations to prove whatever came of it, right? It went in that direction. And it's part of the lifeblood of the community. I mean, and only recently, I think it was just the previous year, GitHub awarded the Python community with the community award for being so welcoming and accepting. We had the former BDFL, benefactor dictator for life, on stage as a recent keynote with his Pi Ladies and PyCon Charlas shirt on, really ostensibly like advocating for the lifeblood of the community, which is diversity of thought, diversity in nationality and language and contribution and types of contributions. And that's never been a weakness. Well, it's not a weakness of the community. It is a strength, and is a strength we should continue to invest in. So I think the way that the community has responded to it. I mean, it's been an outpouring of support.
Can you tell me about that? What happened after you said, we're not taking the money?
Yeah. Well, from my vantage, I'd love to hear from Loren as well. I mean, my vantage has been an outpouring of support. I got text messages from friends saying, I just gave $100 and my company match and X and Y and Z and good on you all. And it was lovely. And it felt like a very strong, easy, hard, but easy decision because we were all empowered with all of the I's dotted and the T's crossed to be able to make that decision.
Yeah. We got a flood of donations in response, which I think it's easy to say like, well, of course you did. But like, we were not expecting that. And there, there's like a lot of things that were like, oh, it makes so much sense if people wanted to support this. But like, you never know if that's going to happen. And right now I can give you a live number, but I should give a name to the cute snake thermometer if I'm going to call it out twice in a podcast. Sorry. But yeah, we're at almost $299,000 since,
Monty,
which is our...
It wasn't Python named after Monty Python? So
we can name him Monty.
Yeah, he could be Monty. Anyway, Monty says $298,742 right now. So our normal fundraiser is more like $40,000 total for the whole thing. And we're recording on December 2nd. So if you want to know the current number, you can go look it up. That to us is like a real outpouring is the word usually used. I say that's an outpouring. We were overwhelmed. We even got an anonymous $100,000 donation. I had a...
Wasn't me. That sounds great. Wasn't me.
I had a board emeritus chair who I will not name because he hates when I do that. And he also hates when I subtweet him, but I'm doing it. Sorry. But he reached out to me. He's like, but like somebody knows, right? And I'm like, no, actually in the US, you can really donate anonymously. So I really don't know. I'm not being coy. That was just shocking and amazing. And we had a really awesome group of community members start a matching campaign, which was just like watching that happen organically was really moving and amazing. It's easy. I'm wearing my critical hat. If I were listening to this, I would be like, oh, of course they knew they were going to fundraise off this. And like, I'll be frank, like, did I make sure that our statement about it went out before the fundraiser started? Yes, I did make sure that it went out before December. But like, that was just, oh, we should make sure it goes out before December so that we can refer to it during the
we
fundraiser.
Are investing in the sustainability of our organization. Absolutely. We're going to try to get our ducks in a row when we turn down $1.5 million.
But like, did I expect to almost reach our goal of 100,000 pi? No.
Yeah.
So good work.
That's been very exciting. And like I say, I love being in a position where our stakeholders that we're working for are the same people funding us. And I like my boss to be the users.
Yeah.
And just feeling like it also sounds really like a line to say it's about more than the money, but it feels really like warm and safe to be able to share a difficult decision we made.
Yeah.
And have the community really stand up and be like, we're with you. We got you. That's been amazing.
As an interesting segue, and I am accused of being a cheerleader in all scenarios. We've been talking about how are we going to fund open source for decades, right? Like, what does it mean? Who's funding open source? I give an interesting keynote on the most popular packages right now and then how they're maintained as a subsection of that. And I think this is a interesting arc we're experiencing in this decade period. I'm sure it'll look different in the next several decades, but I'm really hoping that the numbers will have 2 and 3 commas from individual donations. And I think that we have an opportunity to flex our muscle with these people. Like, we get all of these individual donations. Every single one of them are now emotionally invested or now more tuned in to the ongoings of the PSF than they were before and are invested because their dollar went behind. And we now have stakeholders and advocates. And so I feel honored that we earned their trust and that we'll continue to earn their trust, and hopefully getting 3.1 pi times 100,000 is going to be laughable in a couple of years because we've done that number times over. I'm really excited. I'm really optimistic. I think the name and shame, these multi-million-dollar AI companies all do it because Loren can't. All say, give them your money because you're making billions and trillions off of this labor. And we can do it. I mean, we're a huge force and we can absolutely do it. And we're showing the proof in that. And I know we're just going to continue doing that all the way through May, through PyCon and next year.
That's a great note to end on. I really love the optimism. We do have to wrap up. This is only supposed to be an hour-long podcast. My issue with Python is that I just want to keep talking about it the entire time. Loren, that sounds like amazing, amazing work. It is no small joke to turn down a grant that you've written, because that is a lot of different types of coffee having been made to keep that grant chugging forward and to write stuff like that, having been there in the trenches as well. That is hard, hard work. So good job, and good job for sticking to your guns and your values and your principles. Need to find another nonviolent way of saying sticking to your guns.
We like to say having a spine, because that's the thing about snakes. We're all spine.
Spines are pretty good.
Basically all spine.
That is true. And we're all vertebrates together. So amazing. Okay, sticking to your spine, having a spine. Who needs jellyfish anyway? That was really, really great. Thank you so much for giving the story about how that happened. And as we had at the beginning of the podcast, of course, listeners, you can still donate. And please, please do so. Given that we have so little time, I'm going to ask, do you have 30 seconds of anything that you want to pitch or anything else you want to say besides donate as we wrap up?
Yeah, if this makes it out in time, the PyCon US call for proposals is open through December 19th. And we would love to see your submissions. We have an AI track and a security track for the first time. Please join us. We'd love to hear you.
CFP for the win. December 19th. Get it in now. We will try to make sure it is there early to make sure that that happens. Dawn, you have anything else? Any final messages?
No, it's a pleasure being here.
Amazing. I think since we've run over, we may not have time to spend too much on Spotlight, which is the part of the show where we talk about other people's projects or things. So just quickly, just name drop something you want to spotlight. Traditionally, the host goes first. My spotlight today is just Phyllis. Again, if you're an accountant and you want to go work for like open source foundations, there's tons and tons of work to be done. For those who are already doing that, go ahead and do it. Phyllis, you're amazing. Dawn, what's your spotlight today?
PyScript. I've been hanging out on the PyScript community call. If you're familiar with Python and the web, many people are working on it in different angles and Scriptum and WASM and all that. But PyScript is a really cool one.
Thank you so much, Loren.
The carpentries, I mentioned we talked to peers. They had also applied for an NSF grant, and for similar reasons, they also withdrew their proposal, and they teach foundational coding and data science skills to researchers worldwide. They're great. Their head, Dr. Carrie Jordan, was a keynoter at PyCon US, and she's awesome. And the carpentries is great. Go support them.
Woo!
Second to that. Thank you, listeners, so much for being on this podcast. There are some things you can do now. One, you can go to the PSF and you can donate. You can go to python.org and please donate. Two, you can donate to this podcast because editing is not free. And Paul, our editor, is amazing. Go to opencollective.com/sustainoss. That would be really, really dope. If you actually want to do corporate sponsorship, please get in touch immediately. You can email podcast@sustainoss.org or richard@sustainoss.org. You can also rate us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or actually don't use Spotify. They're horrible. But anywhere where you're listening to this podcast, that would be really, really great. Follow us on Mastodon and LinkedIn. We are not on X. I don't even like saying X. We're not on the place, but formerly Twitter. You can join our discourse at discourse@sustainoss.org. Discourse is great because they're open source. They're really, really cool. And you can come talk about cool stuff there. You can also find the episodes and show notes, which are all run on open source software, including on Netlify at podcast.sustainoss.org. Once more, you can donate. And of course, you can find the show notes online where you can learn more about Dawn and Loren and Deb and all the other amazing people at the PSF. Dawn, Loren, thank you so much. Take care. Good luck. Yeah, more spot. Yeah, Python. Woo!